where first offenders share the same environment with hardened criminals. And we've heard of reports of people who have gone in there for very simple offenses and have come out to become hardened criminals and have learned all kinds of things, courtesy of being incarcerated. And of course, the very basics have been denied. Generally, what would you say is the state of custodial centers today across the country?
Okay, thank you again. Thank you. We have about 256 or thereabout custodial centers across the country, and that includes both the satellites and the lockups. Perhaps I should say that truly when I say there are people who are innocent, there are people who are innocent, not just by the virtue of the fact that they have not been convicted. So yes, we have a disproportionate number who are not yet convicted. So when we use the term awaiting trial, it's being used in a very general term. Some of those who are said to be awaiting trial, actually their trials have commenced. So you see, when that population is about over 70% when you look at the total figure for the whole country. But that's not the whole picture, because in some custodial centers, it's as high as 87%, 90-something%. But it is important to also note that it is not all custodial centers that are congested. No. Most of the ones that you have in urban areas, and I think when we looked at the analysis, it's about 30 or so custodial centers that are so overstretched. Okay. Places like Lagos, for example, we have the population, about 10% of the total inmate population in the whole country are in Lagos. You have facilities like in Port Harcourt that is overstretched, and perhaps when you say this, people may not understand, but if they can imagine that a facility that perhaps is built for 800 is keeping about 4,000 plus. So every custodial center has a designated capacity. Once you come inside, you will see the designated capacity. But when you're talking about this number being overstretched, there are two factors that we must always bear in mind. And I'm very happy that the DIG retired. And the first point is about the rate of reception into custody. So once a country is receiving more, doing everything, pretty high use of pre-trial detention and all of that, pushing people in for whatever reason, environmental offenses, you push them in, they don't pay fine, you push them in. And the second leg is the duration in custody. That's why we need a holistic perspective. Right from the very first point, the arresting agencies, the police, for example, all the policing agencies. So everything that goes wrong in the system goes wrong across that chain. So yes, because if the facility is overstretched, as your guess is as good as mine, you find out that it becomes difficult to manage that population. So what really happens in the day-to-day activities in most custodial centers is that because the high number of those who haven't been convicted, so they're all thinking about going to court, they're all thinking about leaving the custody, when would they be released, and it makes the management and regime for that very difficult for correctional officers. Now, every correctional officer will tell you that managing those who haven't been convicted is a big problem. Once they are convicted, it's easy, when you are leaving. Then you can plan on, say, okay, if you have 3 years to stay, maybe the first 6 months you are going to do this training or that training or that training. But when that is not the case, it becomes problematic. But maybe I should say this. I told you there are custodial centers that are not congested. The Controller General of Corrections has the power to move someone from one custodial center to any other custodial center in the country, which means he or she can say, if a custodial center is overcrowded, I can move the inmates or some inmates there to one that is not overcrowded. The zonal coordinator can do that for custodial centers within the zone. The controller for the state can do that for the custodial centers within the state. Now, why it's not being done much is that because of this high proportion of persons who haven't been convicted. If you move them, it then means that the next day they're going to go to court. Will you now move them back again? So that's why, as much as possible, we need to do the needful to ensure that the high number of persons we have in our custodial centers are convicted persons. The question is, why do we have this long delay? Because delay is equals to denial. Justice delayed is justice denied. Now, the major thing is that all of the processes, I talked about the policing agencies, when investigation is not done diligently. So you are generally arresting people even when you don't have enough evidence to arrest them. Section 35, subsection 5 of the Constitution is one that the proviso is very worrisome, because this section talks about the time limit where someone needs to be presented in court after being arrested. Because of the proviso that excludes certain types of offenses. So everyone perhaps that the police or police agents arrest, because you know that you can't move that person to court within 48 hours, then maybe, even if it's a minor offense, I probably put one major big offense against, when I know I have no evidence to prove that case. And I will keep saying investigation is going on. Now, you move away from the fact that the policing agencies are not doing the needful in terms of investigation. Then you go to the prosecuting agencies. To what extent is those prosecution being diligently dispatched? Even in terms of getting the DPP's advice. You find a situation where many times people are still waiting in custody before they will be able to get the advice to say, oh yes, we can proceed with this prosecution or not. Then you go to the court and see the number of adjournments that are given in the court. So you go and look at the issues about the fact that witnesses are not supported enough, and you and I know that once you don't provide the needed information to witnesses or provide the needed support to witnesses, your case is as good as not going to sell through. Now, this reform needs to be seen from a very comprehensive level. Back to your question, the custodial centers are overstretched. Infrastructure overstretched. Number of persons who are being inhabited, especially as I said in the cosmopolitan area, overstretched. Therefore, rehabilitation becomes very difficult to happen. And not to talk about the inhuman, degrading condition that these people go through. You are very, very correct when you said that the young persons, the first offenders, get to be contaminated, and before you know it, they will begin to be hardened criminals. So the basic thing, I remember several years back, when you come into a custodial center, you will see that those who haven't been convicted are completely excluded and separated from those who are convicted. And there are certain attempts to segregate depending on the risk level of the inmate. But these days, because of the population problem, it's not happening. So that's part of the issue.